Hello and welcome. I'm Linda and I'll be sharing with you today how I made these 5 cards. And they're each a little different, so I'll explain how I did them. First, I started off with Fabriano hot press 140-pound watercolor paper, and I cut that down. It's 9 by 12 and I just cut it in quarters. And then I took a piece of that and put it in my Big Shot. And then I took a Simon Says stamp Maryland stencil and I used Versamark ink to ink that up. And then I placed it on my watercolor paper with the other cutting plate on top, and I ran it through my Big Shot. And then I used some Recollections gold embossing powder over the top of it, and I had a little where I didn't want it, so I used a dry paintbrush to help get rid of the residue where I didn't want it, because I forgot to use my embossing buddy. And this one I used the Crafter's Workshop Mini Fantasy Sphere stencil, and I inked that up with Versamark, but I remembered the embossing buddy on this one. And I took that one and I ran that one through my Big Shot as well. And then I embossed that with the same Recollections gold embossing powder. And I like the Recollections embossing powder because I don't think it leaves a lot of extra where you don't want it if you forget, like I did on the first one. But then I just took those and I heat set those. And you can see how shiny they are. And then I took the 2 panels and I taped them down to just some white marker board that I have cut down to use as my watercoloring boards. And then I took some watercolors, Winsor & Newton watercolors, and I watercolored those 2 panels, and I started with the first one with blues and greens, little gray and black, and I just started by placing some water over the whole panel and then adding color in. And with watercolors you can just continue to add color. If your paper is still wet, you can continue to add color. Then when I was happy with the way that one was, I went to the second one, and this time I did the clear water over the top again. So this is a wet on wet method, and I used pinks and purples and some reds to do this one. But that red color got a little much and I thought I had ruined it. So I was adding a little water in. But I had thought I had totally messed it up. So I started to dry this one, trying to fix where there wasn't enough color, where there was too much color, adding a little more purple. And then I got so that I liked it. And then I started using a little water and a baby wipe to help remove some of the excess watercolors that were on top of the embossing powder. And you can see how the embossing powder is starting to shine more. And then I just took the other blue panel that I had done, and I did the same thing, removing any leftover watercolors that were on top of the embossing powder. Then I removed the panels from off of the pieces of marker board and found some colored cardstock that I liked with them. And then I applied some strong adhesive to the back of the panels and applied those to the card bases. And I left those without a sentiment. I left all the cards without sentiments, and I will decide what I want to use the card for later. Then I took some vellum paper and I cut that down and applied the embossing buddy to the vellum paper and put that in my big shot. And then I took that same Maryland stencil from Simon Says Stamp and applied Versamark ink to that. And I put that on top of the vellum paper and I ran that through the big shot. But I found it left more of a two-line image where I didn't use a paper shim. So looking back, I should have used a paper shim with the vellum paper. But it still turned out pretty cool. I liked how it turned out. And then I applied that same Recollections gold embossing powder and I heat set that. And I set that one aside and I moved on to a second one where I used a Hero Arts large flower stencil. And I applied Versamark ink to that large stencil. And then I used the embossing buddy to the vellum paper, and I put that in the big shot. And I used a spare piece of paper to cover up the back side of where the card would be, because I thought I was going to use the whole vellum piece of paper. But since I didn't use a shim, it didn't get the embossing all the way on the top. And so I used a Versamark pen and tried to fill in a little bit, and excuse my head in the video here and there. I don't have my camera set up quite how I would like it, but we're working on it. So I filled in where it didn't quite reach, and I sprinkled more of the embossing powder on that, and then I adhered that with Distress Collage Medium Matte to a pink card base. I cut it down. I decided I'd like just the vellum part on top of that one. Then I took the panel, the vellum panel that I applied the Maryland stencil to, and some Copic markers, and I applied the Copic markers to the back side of the vellum in a stained glass pattern, in some pinks and blues and grays. And then I applied some Distress Collage Medium Matte to the back to adhere it to just some regular white cardstock. And then the final card, which I did not show making this card on video, I took the Simon Says Stamp Heart Mandala stencil and I applied that with Versamark and some champagne embossing powder to a card base which I had used Distress inks to do a background on, and that one turned out really pretty, but I just didn't show it on video. And here are the 5 cards which I created today, and I will put sentiments on them when I decide what I want to use them for. Thanks for joining me, and I appreciate you watching my video today. and I hope you have enjoyed the cards that I have created. Thanks. Bye.